Well, now that you know the basics of slope, we're going to take that one step further. If you remember, when we were talking about functions, every time we had a linear function, we had equations that looked like this. We'd have y equals some number times x, and then we added or subtracted some other number, where this was our coefficient in the first spot there, and our constant was the last spot, the number all by itself. Now, that idea, that format, is actually something called slope-intercept form, and that's the same format for any type of line. So we have y equals, we had that before, m is our coefficient, which is also the slope. So the number that you multiply your x by is actually the slope of the line. And then you remember b, which is going to be our constant, that is our y-intercept. And we talked about that before, so that's not really new. We knew this number before. We got that from our patterns. We figured out how much it's increasing or decreasing by consistently on the outputs. And that was our coefficient. The y-intercept was where our graph hit the y-axis, and that was our constant. The only difference, the only thing new really here is that that coefficient is also the slope. So it's going to work the same way, same number. So let's look at an example to help you really kind of get a visual of what this means. So it says, identify the slope and the y-intercept of the line described by y equals 3x plus 4. All right, well, this is slope-intercept form, and it's called slope-intercept form because it names the slope, and it tells you the intercept. In this case, it's the y-intercept. So the slope, which is the m value, is what number? Go ahead and fill that in on your paper. All right, what'd you get? Hopefully you said the slope is 3. And then also we talked about the idea that slope is rise over run. And if we're talking rise over run, that means a fraction. So let's think about what that means. If we were to write 3 as a fraction, how much would we rise and how much would we run? How do you write 3 as a fraction? Go ahead and write that in on your paper. Pause me if need be. Hopefully you said it is 3 over 1. That means we're going to rise 3 and run 1. 3 over 1 is the same as 3. All right, now let's look at the y-intercept. The b value, also known as your constant. What is the constant in our equation? And if you look, it is right here. That is a positive 4. So our constant is 4, which is our y-intercept. And then a mention up here, the coefficient, again, is your slope. Same thing. So a lot of the same words that we've been using, it's not really a new idea, just a different word to go along with it. So now let's graph this using these two pieces of information. And it makes it really easy to graph by doing these, using these two ideas. First, I'm going to start with the y-intercept. And I'm going to go with red. My y-intercept is 4. So I'm going to go to my y-axis and count up to 4 and put a dot. That's 1 point on my line. Now the way I can get my other points is by using the slope. The slope tells me how steep this line is. It tells me for every 3 units that I go up, I'm going to go over 1, and I will hit the line again. So I'm going to go to the only point that I know right now, which is my y-intercept, and I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to run 1, and I'm going to plot a point. And that right there tells me that's another point on my line. I could keep doing this. Go up 1, 2, 3, over 1. So that point is 2, 10. That's another point on my line. Now, if I wanted to go back down this way, I could do the same thing as long as I follow the same pattern. This time, though, I need to go down. So if I were to go down 3 and over to the left 1, that will get me a point on that line. And I could go down 3 more and over to the left 1, and that will still be on that same line. Now I'm just going to take my line and I'm just going to connect these points. I just need to move mine around here. Go ahead and use your straight edge, and you're going to connect your points with your straight edge, and that will give you the graph of that line. So you just graphed that line from only the equation, just knowing how important those two numbers were and how to interpret them. All right, let's take another look at another example. Let's go to the back side and see if we can get a little more practice with this. All right, I'm going to give you a little more freedom on this one. First of all, it says identify the slope and y-intercept of the line described by y equals negative 2x plus 5. So take a minute, pause me right now, and go ahead and fill in your slope and your y-intercept in the blanks. Your your slope is the same as your coefficient, so our slope is negative 2. Our y-intercept is positive 5, so that's my b value. Now, to graph this, remember we need a rise and a run for our slope. So we need to write negative 2 as a fraction, basically. So how can we write negative 2 as a fraction? Go ahead and fill that in right next to it. Put an equal sign and fill in how do you write negative 2 as a fraction. Hopefully you came up with negative 2 over 1, which means negative 2 divided by 1. If you divide negative 2 by 1, you will get negative 2. Now, we talked about this earlier in the year. You can also write a negative fraction the other way. So you could move that negative to the numerator on top, or you could put it on the denominator. So I could say 2 divided by negative 1, and that also will equal negative 2. So either one of these will work because they are the same thing. So now let's graph it. Let's first go to our y-intercept, which is positive 5. So we go to the y-axis, we go to a positive 5, plot our point. Now, if I use my slope of negative 2 over 1, that means I rise negative 2 and I run positive 1, which is down 2 and to the right 1. So I'm going to start here at my y-intercept. I'm going to rise negative 2 or go down 2, and then I'm going to run 1. And 1 positive 1 is 1 to the right. Now let's think about if we had done this fraction right here as our slope, because I said before they're both right, so let's look how that would work. This tells me I should rise 2, so let's go back to our y-intercept. If I rise 2, which way am I going to go? Up or down 2? Hopefully you're saying up 2, which is correct. And then if I run a negative 1, do I go 1 to the right or 1 to the left? And it should be 1 to the left. So let me erase that stray mark I made right there. Now if you look, all 3 of those points are on the same line. So that proves that both of these are actually correct. So let's go ahead and connect these points using our straight edge and make it line up nice and neat and tidy. Go ahead and use your straight edge to do that. And there is the graph of this line right here. All right, I want you to try this third one on your own and see if you can come up with it. So pause me right here and take a minute or two to do it on your own, and then check back and see how you did. All right, now this one was just a tad bit different. Our slope was 1/2, so that's m, and our y-intercept is 3. So hopefully you got both of those correct. The coefficient was 1/2. The constant was 3. So there's your slope and your y-intercept. Now when you graph it, we start off with the y-intercept. So it was positive 3. So I went to positive 3 on the y-axis. My slope is 1 over 2, or rise 1, run 2. So from my y-intercept, I'm going to rise 1 and run 1, 2. And there's my next point at 2, 4. From here, I can continue to make more points on this line by rising 1 and running 2. Rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2, and so on. And then I'll use my straight edge, grab my line over here, and then let's connect those points. Get a nice straight edge on that and make sure you go right through the center of all those points, and your graph of that line should look just like that. Also notice this is not a very steep line because the slope was 1/2. Over here, this line was steeper, also going down from left to right because the slope was negative and the slope was a bigger number. The rise and run were different. The rise was bigger than the run, so that means it's going to be a steeper line. Go back over to the one on the front page. Let's look at the slope on that one. That was a slope of 3. That means it's very steep. It was a positive 3, which means that's why it goes up from left to right. And we had a rise of 3 and a run of 1. When the rise is bigger than the run, that means it's going to be steeper. If it's the opposite, it's going to be not so steep. It's going to be much less slanty than if your rise is the bigger number. So there you go. That is how you use slope-intercept form. That is a name that you will need to know, so make sure you're familiar with that slope-intercept form, and you need to know which one of those values is the slope and which one of them is the y-intercept and how to use those to graph. There you go. That's all there is to it. So let me know if you have any questions. Good luck. Bye-bye.